I am here. I am here. And so I guess as is the norm, if we've got some new folks who are here, love to give everyone 30 seconds or so to give a quick introduction of who you are, what you do. Just raise your virtual hand, and Brandon and I will call on you, and we'll meet some new people to the community.
All right.
Marcy, is it?
It's Maurice. Maurice.
Maurice.
Nice to meet you all. Good afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are. I'm Maurice Williams. I'm the CEO of a company called JobMorph. We help job seekers and organizations with coaching. So,
cool. Excellent.
Thank you.
Laura.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you. It is my first time here. So excited to be a part of the conversation. I am a freelancer. I've been a freelancer for the last 12 years. I run a communications consultancy where I work with primarily companies and brands on DEI specific communications. I am a member representative for Freelancers Union based in New York. And I also started a community for Black women who are freelancers, connecting them with opportunities. So glad to be a part of this community.
Fantastic. Great to have you here. Alan.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Chilson from Danaher. So a lot of people are not familiar with Danaher, but we're a global conglomerate. We work in the science and technology space. We own over 20 different operating companies, and I work in talent acquisition here. I'm our global leader for vendor management, so our use of RPOs, MSPs, and search firms. So really interested in learning the content here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Always good to have enterprise businesses here and kind of figuring out what the voice of the free agent and the freelancer and the platforms are bringing to the market. So thanks for being here. Victoria.
Hello, everyone. This is my first time here as well. I am currently working in the people operations business, kind of transforming how we do operations at a startup within the psychedelics industry. Outside of that, I do a lot of work in the DEI space as well, specifically with veterans and other trans people, anyone across the queer spectrum, really. So there's a lot to do, a lot to learn, and I think that's what brought me here more than anything else, is to learn from all of you and to see what the rest of the world is doing. Look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thanks for being here. Erin.
Hello, some familiar faces, which is lovely to see, but I'm Erin. I'm here as an independent. I've been in kind of the talent network, talent platform, talent marketplace space for about 6 or 7 years. So really just love nerding out on community. I'm also a remote native. I've been working remotely for 13 years and I'm an ex-digital nomad. So anything that's about the future of work and ways that industry is changing, I'm really interested in hearing about. So can't wait to hear from all of you.
Fantastic. Danny.
Yeah, sorry, my video is not working on my phone, but this is my first time here. Was recommended by Steve Rader from NASA. We are working on building a universal talent passport system. We're in a very early stage of it, about to onboard some of our first clients. We've also created what we call STAMP, which is Standardized Talent Asset Mapping Protocol, which is a linked data file format that is stackable and attachable to verified credentials.
Excellent. Neat stuff in there. Tyler.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tyler. I work with Bology at Deloitte on projects to help our clients demystify the freelance gig work market and see what type of products they could make for that market. So excited to validate some of our thinking with the insight from you all.
Excellent. Maxine?
Hi, everyone. I already want to pick everyone's brain. And which is the reason I am the CEO of a company called Pick My Brain. So we're building a knowledge peer-to-peer marketplace. We're also building knowledge marketplaces for businesses as well. And the idea really is an Amazon-sized marketplace, but no products, just a platform where you can pick people's brain both for free and paid, and list your brain and let the world know that it is accessible and available under your own rate, rules, and availability. Really excited to be here.
Excellent. And Kelly?
I am also here with Tyler and Balaji and working on the same projects as them, and I'm excited to meet you all.
Excellent. It's fun to have so many people who are new into the group. If you haven't already, drop your LinkedIn or contact information into the chat, and I'm sure people will be reaching out. So we have the opportunity to pick each other's brain and figure out how things are going and kind of extend those conversations more broadly. So I'm excited for today. We've got some fun stuff to go through. Glenn Hogson's going to take us through some research that they have completed, but just want to kind of do a quick check with anyone in the community if there are any new updates or information that people need to be aware of. Like I know we saw that IR35, as all of our British friends were excited to see being removed, is back in play again as the British government is going through a little bit of chaos.
What do you mean,
couple
John?
weeks.
I'm running for Prime Minister next week, by the way.
All right.
Right, Barry. We're behind you, man. All of
I'm
us.
the campaign
manager.
I think you guys go in as a pair. Let's
What's
just
happening?
There you go.
I can't believe it. It's ridiculous, isn't it? So yeah, we now are looking for a new Prime Minister, as I'm sure you're all aware, which is good news in many ways, but she wasn't doing a very good job.
Didn't last a bit longer than a head of lettuce.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think the lettuce won.
Can I ask a question of the group? I think it is the topic of the day with what we are seeing from the Biden administration around independent contractors. And this is probably the first time I got a couple of notes from freelancers that work with me on my projects to say, I'm very worried right now. So I'd love to see if you have any full-time options. That has never happened before in the last 6 years. I just want to ensure that I hear from the community about, is this overblown? Is this saber rattling that happens every year? Or is this real?
Well, do you have a comment on that, or Steve? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So these DOL guidance letters get a lot of attention and a lot of press. And what changes, it's not every year, it's every new administration. So Trump administration late in their term put out one that was much more freelancer friendly than the Obama administration. And Biden's basically taken it back to what it was in the Obama administration. There's a long story to this, and it's because worker classification is so complicated. It's mostly done at the states, and so the legal impact on this is actually fairly modest, particularly for the types of freelancers that people in the virtual room here work with. It does have an emotional impact, and it tends to get people worked up, but the actual legal implications, in our opinion and most lawyers' opinions, I should warn, I'm not a lawyer, are actually relatively modest. And if you go back to when we had the Obama administration, the gig economy, freelancers, things were just fine. The gig economy actually blossomed during Obama's administration. So yes, it will have an impact. Particularly, it tends to shake people up when they hear, not people that aren't deep into this, when they hear that the Department of Labor has issued a new rule. Well, first off, it's not actually a rule, it's a guidance letter, it's not a law. And second off, it's only refers to something called the FLSA, the Federal Labor Standards Act. And so it doesn't even affect worker classification specifically, except that state courts and other courts will look to that and take it under advisement. So the negative headlines have been primarily overstate what it does. And you can read any of the Wall Street analysts' reports on Uber and Lyft to verify that. They all think the market way overreacted. But it does have an impact in the sense that people who aren't deep into this will say, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't hire a freelancer.
But I think the problem that I see is, yes, there's the negative press happening around this. But my bigger problem is the complete absolute silence from all the freelancing companies putting out a message saying, this is what it is. This is our position to stand around it. They've never done that in the past. And I don't understand why there is just let people, like, you want to build communities and provide income and make shitloads of money while doing that. But when something like this happens, where is their voice?
Oh, two things there. The first one is primarily they look at it and they say, well, this was not a very big event. And so they say we don't have to put out anything. And then the second thing is they don't want to draw targeting from either the federal government, politicians, and or other regulators. And so that's why they're quiet. But the primary reason they're quiet is that their legal counsels are saying this isn't that big. It isn't as big a deal as the press is making it out. So let's just pass on it.
But Uber and Lyft always put out statements whenever something like this happens.
Yep.
But freelancing companies, all of the open talent that is white collar open talent just completely just ignores it.
Yeah, Uber and Lyft put out, DoorDash, they all put out statements saying, actually saying we like it, because they were worried about something that was going to be much worse. They thought it would be like California's AB5 rule, maybe even a little bit more, and it was actually lighter than that. And so the consumer-facing gig companies have put out statements, and pretty much all of them said we're happy with it. Yeah, the white collar business to business folks just don't tend to comment on these things.
Yeah, it's like I will not take my Uber ride to the airport because Biden said something. Versus me as Deloitte, I need to know what my Upwork thinks about it. So it completely feels, sorry to use technical terms, like ass backwards on the reaction.
Well, as I said, they're basically ignoring it because they figure it's not going to impact them in any major way. And so
we need to hear that if they think so.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But what I can share for you on it's related. We had talked about the ILO meeting that was taking place, and it did take place last week in Geneva with trade organizations. Actually, the U.S. government Department of Labor was there. Raj Nayak was one of the representatives. The employers, the trade unions, and the governments, after 4 days of pretty intense meetings, agreed that they can't agree. And so no policy action was taken. So they're in a positive sense for me, they're recognizing that this is a more complex issue and maybe we need to just watch it and monitor the market before we start issuing rulings. So there's a healthy non-decision from government officials at this point. Arthur, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks, John. So to this whole conversation, I kind of have a question and a comment. My biggest concern is that it almost feels like an overcorrection, Steve. I've seen some of the language being more about, and this is not just the Department of Labor, but also the National Labor Relations Board. They're taking more of an approach on not only direct and indirect control, but they're even extending it to whether that's exerted or not, which just makes this whole thing start to bleed in with the NLRB's rule, which starts to look like anybody, employee or contractor, can basically sign up for collective bargaining, which I think is the risk, Balaji, that needs to be monitored. And I pinged you separately, but and John Healy, I know you're on some of the calls, but CWI, Coalition for Workforce Innovation, puts out a lot of comments and updates and talks about the implications of a lot of these things. So I'd certainly encourage the community to follow along with their community as well, because it's more about what's going on the Hill.
Yeah, CWI is a good group to follow for this. Their focus is more traditional work, independent workers in traditional industries, but they do keep a tight. They do really watch very closely and lobby heavily. That's a very good point, Arthur.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, I want to take a moment and turn this over to Glenn. Let him get going on here. So if you have not met Glenn, he's from Trade Europa. He's the CEO and the founder of the organization. Really, I'll let Glenn, you give a kind of a quick overview, but I think the net of what got us is some research that he and his organization did to put some focus on freelancers themselves and gather their voice. So I want to give you a chance to review that and move forward.
Thanks very much indeed for that one, John. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just on the back of that as well, given the sort of work through the think tank, we started the freelance movement as a European stakeholder initiative, trade association, to really bring together the freelancers, platforms, companies, and organizations who are involved in the future of work. And evolving all the time. We started out with very much a focus on sort of gig and platform work, but now it's going more into the future of work. What are the thoughts, ideas, and ideas behind sort of open talent and allowing people to be able to make money from their passion? And basically, if we can just put up a few slides that are prepared on the screen. As well, to take us through a little bit of the findings of this new study. Basically, if we can start just by saying a little bit about the context. So onto the next slide would be great if we can just sort of get that going, because we saw this much needed disruption to the labor market here in Europe that was required, and looking at trying to promote a way of moving away from vested interests, trying to improve efficiencies at the same time. And of course, as we all know, fueled by the coronavirus pandemic, people have got a taste for remote work, in some cases taking it to the digital nomad lifestyle, but across the board moving away from the 9-to-5 framework that has been there from the beginning. But of course, we've got new legislation which is coming up in Europe on the back of this around sort of taxation, but also platform economy worker rights, which is a piece of legislation which is going through the European institutions at the moment. And one of the things we've seen there, that the big players have been the trade unions and big industry have been part of that, but no one really spoke to freelancers, the people actually doing the jobs, understanding what their rationale, their motives, but also what are their fears, opportunities, threats that were basically going through them at the moment. So what we did was basically said that, well, if no one's going to do it, we might as well sort of step up to the plate, and wanted to really hold a mirror up to what's happening to show decision makers and stakeholders in a European but also broader context as well. And even looking at the European Commission's figures for Europe, which are usually quite modest, they're saying that there's already over 28 million people in Europe who are actually involved in labor over digital platforms. And the estimate is 43 million by 2025. And also really what we want to do within this process as well was actually sort of show a little bit more about the range of sectors. I've got this graphic here because this in the mind of a lot of people. The viewpoint here is that the platform economy, the future of work, is basically people delivering food on bicycles for very little money. But if we move to the next slide, what the reality is, it's much broader than that. It's all the way from artists, musicians, to lawyers and healthcare professionals. And I think to really be able to shine a light on what the reality is and how the labor market's changing, this was also another one of the rationale behind us doing this. So to say a little bit about the methodology, we got survey data, first-hand data from individuals, but also we used the Unveil app, which is through one of our partners developed this, which actually goes into the data from income and work data. So it's all compliant through GDPR and data protection rules, but by sharing your password, you can actually sort of get into the raw data, which is interesting for some of the platforms like Fivers and the Upworks of this world, as well as Glovo, Bolt, Uber. But we also wanted to pull together qualitative data as well. So the stories and anecdotes and quotes, as well as the statistics. So we had a number of interviews. And in total, we had over 2,500 people who took part in this, which is interesting to give a snapshot as to what's happening and where things are going at the moment. If we go to the next slide, I'd just like to not go everything in detail, but just to pull out some of the data points which I think are interesting. And I think in a lot of cases back up what we already know and really sort of underline some of the trends that we're seeing in Europe, but I think also more broadly as well. And I think age is an interesting one. There's the viewpoint that this is just something for millennials and Gen Z, but the feedback from our study is very much the fact that we have more people who are in the older demographic who are involved in this, who want to make money from their talents and abilities. If we just we're going through, yeah, we're going quite quickly. If we just go on to the next one now, Brendan, that'd be fantastic. And also the fact that this is seen as being dead-end jobs, something in the narrative that is very low skilled. The reality is that a lot of the people who are involved in freelancing have at least a university degree. Many have more education on top of that and really want to use their knowledge, talent, and expertise to be able to earn money. And this is something that came out loud and clear from the interviews that we were carrying out. And if we move on to the next slide, that also backs up the education piece with, will you be doing this in the future? And almost 80% of people were saying that, yeah, we like this, we've got a taste for it. It gives us the choice, flexibility that we're looking for, and therefore we think that this is something that is a lifestyle choice for us, and we want to sort of continue it further into the future as well. And also linked to that is the next slide and the data that we've pulled out in terms of the earnings, because one of the traditional things that's thrown against the sector is that, the future of work is terrible because people earn no money. Now, in a European context, we have the minimum wage per month, the minimum wage levels that are set. It's 322 euros in Bulgaria to over 2,200 euros a month in Luxembourg. So if we say that there's a big span across the European countries, but if we look at the levels here in terms of, almost a fifth of people earning between 2,000 and 5,000 euros, this of course is easy these days because the dollar and the pound are almost exactly the same. So we don't have to do too much calculation. But also these statistics show that over 10% are earning more than 5,000 euros a month. And also within this figure, we've got people who are actually freelancing full time, but also others are doing side hustles and side gigs, which probably accounts for the sort of the yellow and red segments here in terms of the lower amounts of money. But it just shows the breadth and also the depth of the type of work that's being done at the moment, and the different kind of sectors, different kind of individuals who are getting involved in this kind of work. And from earnings, if we just look at the next slide, we'll be able to say this one here, which has got a lot of attention, is the fact that over 60, 2/3 have enough money to pay their bills. But when asked, people, almost a third saying, well, we don't have enough money to pay our bills. And this is something that people have leapt on at the moment, particularly given the cost of living crisis, which we're undergoing at the moment, prices rising, inflation. There is a worry that the freelancers and people on short-term contracts and project work will be negatively affected here. But I think that if you look in the traditional sector, the number of what you would call safe employers in the public and private sector who are letting go workers at the moment, I think this idea of security is very much a thin concept at the best of times, and particularly now. But also, if we go into the next slide, from the bills element, what we're seeing is that even in tougher times, people want to look at remote work. They want to look at freelancing and earning money away from the 9 to 5. Our results show that almost 80% of people were really into this and think it's something that they're not forced into, but something that they've gone into with their eyes open and been able to sort of make the leap and make this change. And I think this is backed up by the next slide as well, which shows almost 90% of people actually say that they enjoy freelancing. They enjoy all that it entails. Of course, there's difficult times. A lot of people work as many hours as before. Some cases, they're actually sort of earning a little bit less money, but the element is that they enjoy freelancing as a work style that replaces the traditional regular 9-to-5 arrangements. And if we just look at the next, go on from the piece from this, the element of a dead-end job also comes up again with the findings that we've got, that people do think either strongly or they agree in the affirmative anyway, that freelancing and the digital methods of acquiring new skills, but also what we hear as well is that this accelerated feedback loops as well. By doing projects, you get feedback more quickly. It's moving away from the traditional sort of annual or 6-monthly performance review, but by doing more work for more employers and with different partners, you're in an opportunity to actually gain more skills, deliver value, and get very specific feedback on your expertise and what you're actually delivering to an organization, which I think is an interesting and a slightly different trend from a traditional 9-to-5 work environment. And if we just go on to the next slide on the back of this as well, what do we enjoy most? Of course, the money and things is part and parcel of working, but I think it's interesting to highlight the element about interesting varied work, almost 20%, and then the flexibility and choice piece, which is well over half, almost 62% of people saying that this is key. And I think if we sort of juxtapose this with traditional work environments, the numbers with surveys that are carried out is normally 60 to 70 people either dislike or actively hate their current employment. So I think that putting these two elements side to side, I think is an interesting trend to show that there's more of a match between people's work expectations and the reality that can be delivered through a more of a freelance lifestyle delivered by digital platforms as well. And just move on, please, Brendan, on this one. This would be good to look at this. I think there's a few main trends that we see out of the back of this as well. And I think that one of the big divisions that we're seeing increasingly is this kind of divide between local gig work, people who have to sort of do things on sites, the work that's been found through a digital platform, and the individuals who can use the human cloud, who can work from anywhere as long as they've got a Wi-Fi connection, a laptop, and a phone. They can be productive and deliver value to companies and organizations. And this is really sort of borne out in terms of the opportunities, the money, and this seems to be something over time that seems to be that seems to be growing as well. The individuals with specific knowledge and expertise, particularly with the war for talent hotting up, there is more opportunities for the people with these specific skills, knowledge, and talents. And as I was saying before, the age element, it's not just sort of the younger demographic who are into this, it's everyone who is gaining opportunities through digitalization and digital labor platforms being able to offer more opportunities within that. And also we see that multitasking, multi-apping as well as multitasking is growing. We're also seeing the rise of aggregator sites and platforms as well. And this is something in a European context that we see as being quite worrying, given the fact there's a tendency towards presumption of employment and actually moving away from either bogus.
If you're a woman over 40 and you want to lose belly fat,
Yeah, we want to lose belly fat, but maybe not in this kind of way here.
Perfect timing.
Someone has thrown up.
I want to
I
lose
love
belly
it.
fat, but I'm not a
Is
woman
that
over.
part of the research?
We didn't do any research on belly fat and platform workers, but next time we will. We'll certainly look into it. But no, but this is something that in a European context is being limited by this kind of pushing everyone down the employment route, which could really limit the opportunities for legitimate freelancers, and something that we need to keep an eye on in terms of the new legislation. Also, what we see a lot with the platforms as well is there's still a lot of manual labor involved as well, and the opportunity of automation, the opportunity of AI into some of these matching services to improve the speed, but also improve the more qualified strike rate is something that there is room for improvement. But it seems to be loud and clear from individuals that freedom, choice, the ability to find opportunities is key. And even as the recession hits, it seems to be people think that they've made the switch, and the kind of the genie's out of the bottle, and it's very unlikely that anyone can put it back in now. And this leads on to a trend that we've talked about on these calls quite often, this idea that sort of companies and organizations really need a freelancer strategy to be able to bring people into the organization, the open talent, how can the different sort of blended workforce be done in the right way to bring in the skills and expertise that are needed, and also make sure that people who are brought into organizations are not treated as second-class citizens. How to integrate them in the right way will be a key element of this. And at the same time, it's also the new rules of the road, the policy framework, the legislation. This is something that needs to be put together with a real cooperation, real dialogue and consultation between business, public authorities, but also politicians, platforms, and freelancers themselves. Working in silos and working in isolation without sort of listening to the people like ourselves who are at the forefront of this and beyond is going to mean that we're going to have a substandard framework, which is not really going to understand the reality of the future of work and the demands and needs of individuals and how they want to earn money. So it's a one step on a broader trend, and this is particularly with the vote that's coming in the European Parliament at the end of this month. The timing is important for us to be able to sort of get out these facts and figures to be able to hopefully influence the debate at this early stage to make sure that we take the right approach and not the wrong approach. So it's everything to play for.
Good. Well, thanks, Glenn. And certainly want to open it up if people have comments or questions in there. I think it's for me, it becomes really important when we start looking at this kind of research that one, you're doing the legwork of actually getting the feedback from the freelancer community. And that's often the voice that is least heard from within things. If I go back, even the ILO meeting that I referenced, the only freelancer or platform that represents freelancers that was there was Uber. And yet we had government officials from all around the world looking to drive policy decisions. And that's quite scary to me, that we only have one organization and representing one end of the spectrum. And so,
right.
We could certainly dive into areas of wanting to do more comparison. I saw in some of the chat going through some comparison of their perceptions as a full-time employee versus a freelancer and going through, and we all like to get some broader depth of detail, but I think having that voice of the freelancer is more often missed than included. So commend you guys for taking the effort here. Other comments or thoughts from people on the call?
Glenn, Barry here. So I would say
Hey,
on
Barry.
behalf of all women and men over 40 who want to lose belly fat, well done. That was great. I thought it was an awesome, it's a really, really interesting survey results. I always come back to this sort of policy and legislation and think that it's, from what I see here in the UK with IR35, the U-turn that we saw this week, who knows where it will all end up.
Yeah.
Do you see anywhere in the EU or anywhere in Europe where they have been more progressive in terms of legislation for freelance working or freelance platform working? Is there anyone that sort of stands out as a benchmark that we could learn from?
Sadly, not at the moment. I think that what we're learning from best is the negative example. So Spain that put in place its freelancing laws last year, and what we've seen is that presumption of employment has meant that there's actually less jobs. The people who are actually employed are earning less money than before, and also there's more corruption. So the idea that you need to buy a freelancer license. So of course, what's happening is that these licenses are being loaned out to 4 or 5 different people for a fee as well. And then we get these crazy rates that people working sort of 25 hours a day, which is not possible. But of course, you've got individuals using these licenses in a fraudulent way. So it's basically more regulation seems to lead to suboptimal outcomes in terms of the idea of creating opportunity, creating work possibilities for individuals, and getting people into the workforce as well. And we've done sort of quite a lot of work on how the platform and gig economy has helped, particularly migrants in the Nordic countries, to be able to get into the workforce, get into the job market, get skills, either language or just a track record to show that they can actually deliver something. This is something that just seems to be set aside, and my fingers are crossed for the here in the Nordics with the new government that's just taking shape, that we can have a more advanced role to facilitating the future of work and harness it as opposed to creating barriers. But at the moment, there's scant examples of positivity that we can point to.
Thanks, Glenn.
Todd?
Thank you. Glenn, this was a really impressive survey. I know you don't know me, but I've got to ask these questions, and I'm going to be tough on this. I'm concerned that these results are highly biased, and they do not, the pie charts sends up red flags for data scientists like myself. Can you explain the general procedures and the scientific rigor that went into this analysis? Reading the analysis, like, you're not controlling for various confounding variables. And like, for example, the earnings of gig workers are compared to the national average. You're not controlling for the full-time employment in that assessment. So yes, it's obvious that a person who's a full-time employee who also is doing gig work, which is outlined in your survey, they're going to make more money than the national average. But that's not completely true, and it's not as accurate as we would like to see. So can you talk about the analysis and the rigor that went into this?
Yeah, so in terms of, we use it both in terms of the Eurostat figures, in terms of the national averages. We also look at the minimum wage levels that are set in the individual countries, just to be able to get a starting point to be able to measure against. And absolutely, this is a snapshot of 2,500 people plus. It's not to say that this is the labor market across Europe or globally at all, but it's giving us a bit of a flavor for the people who were involved here. And in terms of the raw data that was taken from the survey, and also from the Unveil app, which was made anonymous, but actually sort of pulling out the hours worked and the amounts earned from that. What we've seen is the people at the lower end, shall we say, the ride hailing and the quick commerce side of things, were less willing to be able to share data. We've got some people involved, but shall we say the more high-skilled consultants and freelancers were the people who are more willing and able to take part in this. Some people on this call as well, and I'd like to thank them very personally for taking the time to fill out the survey and be involved. But it's more the higher end, so we probably do have a slightly skewed image in terms of what's coming out here. But given the narrative about dead-end jobs, low salaries, I think it's very important actually to be able to have this caveat, but still shine a light on the people who are making money out of the knowledge, skills, and expertise.
So to make the analysis more complete, I would want to see where those biases are, and can you do a follow-up on this that really that does regression analysis and really just shows us the data and what's really inside of this? Because I feel like that your conclusions are there. I'm surprised by many of them, and I feel like there's more to be done with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we bring out these kind of we don't say this is the facts. We bring out emerging hypotheses as a starting point for further discussion. So we tend to say that, and we actually start with the emerging hypotheses before we go into the data. And it's certainly a starting point for further discussion and collaboration.
Always start with the hypothesis. Always start with the hypothesis. Yes.
Maurice, did you have a comment
Todd.
on here or a question for Glenn?
It's really more of a comment. I've been 30 years in career services, mostly with people who are earning like 100,000 plus US. And it's really interesting. We never, ever really talk to them about gig work it just does. Even when people come to you and say, I want to make this change because I'm looking for a different work-life balance. And, sometimes they even say the income that I'll make at the end doesn't have to be more than I'm making now. It could be less because I'm willing to exchange good work-life balance for dollars, But even in those situations, we don't necessarily go, oh, well, have you thought about doing some kind of freelance gig work? I mean, there's this whole world out there, as you were showing. It's just, we're so programmed into this idea of, a person to a full-time job.
Yeah.
Blew my mind listening to this. I mean, just real.
Yeah, but absolutely. And also I think there's a lot of negativity about terms like gig worker, which has got sort of, certainly in some countries, very negative connotations, and people don't want to class themselves as a freelancer or a gig worker. They'll call themselves an entrepreneur or something like that. But a few of us on the call, through the Association of Future of Work and other bodies, we've actually talked about this kind of lexicon we need to bring in as well, because some of these terms are already toxic and rather loaded. So we need to be able to make this sort of distinction, I think, in some cases on the side of things. But it's a full-time 9-to-5 job. 5 days a week is the standard still for a lot of people, and probably missing out on a lot of people from the workforce as well, who want more flexibility and choice.
Hey, Brendan, just a reminder out of that maybe the lexicon that had been developed by the communications and marketing team that Ashley and Mark led amongst this community might be worth getting back out for people to have access to. So that if they can use that we can leverage that, because a lot of work went into that. Chuck, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I kind of got a two-part question that I have. The first part is you called out the need for legislative work and policy to be developed. And I wondered if you understood or thought about who should be leading that within a governmental organization. I mean, the natural tendency would say this is a labor and employment kind of question, but it would seem by the numbers that it maybe is a business opportunity and should be driven by business and or industry side of that. And then the sort of kind of related to that is that in Canada, at least, we're very close to full employment. There's some recent data came out in the last little while that said we're going to be almost at 1-to-1 or at least 2-to-1 per job. So when you get a full employment situation, the natural thing for the business to do is say, well, maybe I can get somebody part-time, or maybe I can get somebody half-time, or something along that line. So again, it'd be driven by the business as a policy. So they're kind of related questions around who actually should be driving that.
It's a great question, Chuck, and I think it is industry here. For too long, it's been kind of the labor and the unions who've been looking at this, but they come from very much the old-fashioned mindset, and their rationale for this is maintaining their own cartel over this. They don't really. I've some of the more progressive unions even that I've talked to, they've said, well, yeah, this may be more efficient, but at the end of the day, it may affect us in terms of membership and our revenues. So we're not willing to go down that route at this stage. So I think they need to be brought in kicking and screaming on these kind of things. And I think it's really sort of looking at the opportunities from a business perspective to bring this forward. What we're seeing in a sort of European context with the new proposals, which are crazy loaded towards presumption of employment with very specific criteria, a set of 5, and if 2 of the 5 are met, then you are presumed to be an employee, regardless of your situation. And this seems to be crazy and something that we're certainly pushing against at the moment in terms of forming the legislation. So more of a voice for the freelancers, more of a voice for business in actually setting the agenda. And it's some cases it's not really changing mind. It's just filling heads and educating about what is really going on. It's certainly in my experience, it's amazing how little people who should know better really understand about the changes underway and how the labor market is evolving.
Cool. Well, you guys have actually opened up a piece of one of the areas we've talked about and that we're going to be diving into. Brandon, I think you've got one slide that we can maybe show everyone. We've talked for a long time. John, as you were looking at your book, it was all about common language. And we knew that that was a big barrier that was out there. And we've talked about standards that are there. And I think Hannah Young's on CXC has been helping us. So but I encourage everyone to take a screenshot of this. We're going to figure out how to do a little crowdsourcing with everyone. We'll do some kind of an asynchronous piece, whether we use Mural or one of the other tools to get your inputs and feedback. But this is kind of the matrix that we've put together. We introduced it with the Association of the Future of Work. We're going to do a little crowdsourcing with the Freelancer Business Month team next week on this. But our sense is that classification is one of those areas that we've got to get some consistency of language around because the governments are going to care about that no matter how we do that. And then it's the relationship with the worker, the relationship with the client, and at an increasing level, this idea of digital ethics that is becoming a bigger and bigger push. And so what we've decided we're going to do is kind of separate the legal and regulatory side of things and kind of help build out the checklist of things that everyone needs to know and be aware of so that we can be operating properly, but then really look to this community to come back and figure out what is good practice in each of these areas. And how do we start defining that and help the platforms define where they need to be, enable some of the transparency for whether it's the enterprise business or it's the individual worker to figure out which platform is right for me so that they know who signed up for and is committed to each of the different practice areas. So we'll be working through these things. We're welcoming volunteers. If anyone wants to kind of facilitate the asynchronous work, we're happy to have someone do that. Otherwise, Hannah and I will figure that out and bring it together. But then I also wanted to just give Barry a moment because Open Assembly is spending quite a bit of energy putting together, and maybe it's Eleanor who's been on point here, but with Freelancer Business Month, we've got kind of a full schedule for them next week as there's kind of a takeover from CTW and OA to help Alina and her event that's been going on. So Barry, Eleanor, anything you want to add in as we close up?
Yeah, so every day next week, there is a pertinent theme related to the future of work. So each day you've got something different. The first day is about the networked organization and open talent platforms. Second day is about open innovation. The third day is around, help me out here, youth in the enterprise. Fourth day is around creating community, welcoming different diverse people into the workforce. And then we've got the closing day on Friday. Come along, there's some fantastic speakers, including people who are part of this community. It's going to be really fun. Some of the sessions are really interactive. Your very own John Healy will be there. Support him. He's going to do something really interesting around standards.
And John Young,
John Young
all of our Johns. Yeah. And Link is speaking.
Every John.
I'm speaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a load. Alina has done an amazing job. Imagine putting on an event for an entire month.
Extraordinary.
And so this is the final week. So please, yeah, please come along and show and give us your support.
She had a
Fabulous.
really cool tech showcase today. They did a little Dragon's Den of people competing and presenting their ideas out. So yeah, she's done a great job, and we welcome supporting her on that. John Windsor, does the Godfather have some closing comments for us?
No, I love this. I mean, I think that you know, Glenn, awesome job, and I love these sessions where we're talking about research, and I think the key to center of transformation of work for me is we're creating a foundation for everybody to build their businesses. You know, everybody to kind of make a living and create the fertile ground to plant the seeds to make sure that this grows into a massive movement. You know, there's still some headwinds, as we discussed today, on even mindsets on, wow, I never thought about, recommending to people who want to change their careers to look at a freelance option. And those are the kind of things we need to do. We're still at the very beginning of this journey. And I'm so appreciative for all the diversity and the amazing, just the amazing energy that goes into this community. So always in awe. So thanks guys for everything. And John Healy, you're always awesome. An awesome MC running everything. So more to come. Love you guys.
Excellent. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.